Here on Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. We have just returned from the UN Climate Summit in Bonn, Germany, where early Saturday morning, officials representing nearly 200 nations ended an all-night round of negotiations aimed at hammering out the implementation of the 2015 Paris climate deal. Many had feared the U.S. would fully derail this year's talks, as this year was the first COP since President Trump vowed to pull the U.S. out of the landmark 2015 Paris Accord, a process which would take 4 years. But the Fiji Prime Minister, who presided over this year's COP, that's Conference of Parties, said there were notable achievements this year in the agreements around agriculture, ocean protection, indigenous peoples' rights, and a new climate insurance system for poorer nations. Another achievement included the launch of the Powering Past Coal Alliance, a group of more than 20 nations who've committed to phasing out coal. The United States, along with Germany, Poland, Australia, China, and India, refused to sign on to the pledge, although the U.S. states of Washington and Oregon bucked the federal government and did sign on. Many environmental activists, however, say this year's talks did not go nearly far enough, especially as new data shows global carbon dioxide emissions are once again rising after flatlining for 3 years straight. Meanwhile, on December 12th, France will host a climate change summit in Paris on the second anniversary of the signing of the landmark Paris climate deal. French President Emmanuel Macron says President Trump will not be invited. Well, despite President Trump's vows to pull out of the Paris climate deal, there were a number of progressive U.S. senators, governors, mayors who staged an anti-Trump revolt last week in Bonn. Among them, Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Peduto. I began by asking Mayor Peduto of Pittsburgh when President Trump announced in July he was pulling the U.S. out of the Paris climate deal by saying he was elected to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris.
I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris. It is time to put Youngstown, Ohio, Detroit, Michigan, and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, along with many, many other locations within our great country, before Paris, France. It is time to make America great again.
So there he was, Mayor Peduto, saying, I'm here to represent Pittsburgh, not Paris. Your response?
Well, there I was. I get a little alert, and it just says President Trump to leave Paris Agreement. And I just went, that's horrible, because I was at COP21. I was one of nearly 500 mayors that gathered, the largest gathering of mayors in Earth's history, to be able to say to the federal governments, we got this. We're going to do it anyways. We're going to implement it. It's okay. And then about 2 minutes later, I see a tweet from Sean Spicer, and it has that quote on it. And according to my chief of staff, I walked into his office and I just yelled, Pittsburgh. It flew in the face of 30 years of progress that Pittsburgh had made. A city that had lost the quality of its air and its water in an effort to build this country, building every skyscraper, every bridge, and then a city that died, whose economic heart was ripped out of it. And instead of trying to find a way to rebuild the factories and the mills and the mines, found a way to reinvent itself. Very much in the spirit of what the Paris Agreement was talking about. And if there was one city the president could point to that would represent what that spirit of the Paris Agreement was, it was Pittsburgh. So I was taken aback by the very fact that he was using an old stereotype of Pittsburgh in order to make his point. And
you said Pittsburgh stands with the world and will follow Paris Agreement. What kind of response did you get from the White House, Mayor?
There was no response from the White House. And the response that I received from colleagues across the country was overwhelming support. We're with you. The amount of support from the social media, from globally, saying that we're with Pittsburgh and Paris, and then Mayor Hidalgo reaching out as well, and then we penned an op-ed together called Pittsburgh and Paris, and that op-ed led to this op-ed coming into this COP23, Pittsburgh and Bonn. What can we learn from post-industrial cities that won't just allow them to play catch-up to other cities when we're talking about climate change, but leapfrogging other cities to be the leaders in climate change?
So what are you doing in Pittsburgh? What is your commitment to renewables, to a sustainable city?
What we've done in the past year since the president's announcement is increased our commitment to zero waste, increased our commitment to 100% renewable, increased our commitment to ways that transportation, urban planning, housing will all be affected by minimizing the amount of carbon that we're going to be producing. And we've now exceeded what we promised in the Paris Agreement. And that's been happening throughout this country, throughout the United States. You see city after city doing it. It's very important to note that that day the president made that statement, there were 61 U.S. cities that were part of the climate cities. Pittsburgh was one of them. Today, there's 367. It's galvanized the support, Democrat and Republican mayors, Democrat and Republican councils, saying that we will follow through, that we are still in.
We're both here in Bonn, but Democracy Now! Broadcasts from New York from a LEED Platinum certified studio. You talked in this event that was sponsored by young people, young environmental activists, about environmental construction in Pittsburgh. What are you doing to make the building of Pittsburgh sustainable?
Well, Pittsburgh was one of the leaders in the green building movement, and it was led by a woman named Teresa Hines, and she saw the potential of it not only being something that was sustainable, but could also help to bring Pittsburgh back by manufacturing the materials, understanding the techniques, and being able to do it. And so we've partnered with our trade unions in order to be able to take LEED certification to a point where it also means good wages, union wages. We've been able then to take it to the next level, living buildings, buildings that actually use the same amount of energy as a flower. And Pittsburgh is the only city in the world with 2 examples that are presently open. And then we've taken it to passive housing, but not just passive housing, but passive affordable housing. Affordable housing for folks who are getting out of situations where they've been in orphanages or halfway houses, and for seniors to be able to live in quality housing later in life that they can afford to live in quality environmental housing. So we want to see how environmental housing can affect everyone. We were chosen as a choice neighborhood by HUD, and we're creating our greenest development in our poorest neighborhood. And we've also just...
How are you doing that?
We've created a program that went by the neighborhood's community plan that called for green housing, the building of a new park, the establishment of more greenery and urban forest, and we've put it into one of our lowest income neighborhoods. And the last thing that we're doing, we're with HUD right now working to build the largest urban farm in the country. Pittsburgh, in an area that had been abandoned years ago from a former housing area to an area that will come back with mixed housing, including affordability, in the largest urban farm in America.
So you're on the terrorism watch list? Yeah. Mayor Peduto of Pittsburgh?
That would have made it hard to get onto a plane. So there was a lot of conversation that was going on in Pittsburgh very early on with fracking and trying to understand the balance between what the Constitution of Pennsylvania guarantees every Pennsylvanian, which is the guarantee of safe water, and what we could do and what challenges fracking in the city of Pittsburgh would mean in regards to 3 rivers that supply drinking water to all of our people. The question was, would we be able to have a legal argument to ban through zoning the fracking occurring because of the proximity to either high population density or drinking water? And it wasn't really sure, but we were pushing it anyways. During that same process, it came out through an article, I believe, in the Philadelphia Inquirer, that the City Council of the City of Pittsburgh had been placed on the Pennsylvania Homeland Security's terrorism watch list. And during that same time period, we wanted to know how and why that occurred. The person who had been hired by Ed Rendell was removed from office. The bill went through, and it was never challenged. Had it been challenged, we made it very clear we were going to call for full disclosure.
And so what happened now?
there hasn't been any fracking in the city of Pittsburgh. Even though there were land leases at that time in different areas of the city, there's never been a challenge by any of the companies either.
And were you ever stopped from going on a plane?
No.
Let me ask you about sanctuary cities. Is Pittsburgh a sanctuary city?
It is by the definitions of what a sanctuary city is, meaning that we will not detain, arrest any individual based upon a request by ICE as long as there isn't a warrant for their arrest. We will not use our local law enforcement to be federal officials because it goes against the 10th Amendment of the Constitution, and it could also go against the 4th Amendment of search and seizure. We recognize that the rights of individuals under being in this country guarantees them rights under the Constitution. So that part of it is. But our jail system and our court system is separate than our municipal government system. So we don't have any say over those parts of it.
So does this mean you lose any federal funding?
No, because that's been proven in court cases as well, that the interpretation...
They threatened you with it.
Well, yes, they have. And they actually had required cities in applying for the COP grants, the COP grants, to sign to it that they would not be a sanctuary city or would cooperate with ICE on any of the actions. I wouldn't sign it.
So what are you doing here? I mean, we cover this COP summit every single year since Copenhagen. Big U.S. official delegation. This year, well, it looks like the Trump administration will be here, represented by Peabody Coal and a few other corporations, maybe a few government officials. They'll be pushing nuclear power, gas, and coal. So you have a different delegation here. You have a major tent. It's thousands of feet. What's happening? The government's split in two?
I don't think that that is the case. I think that what you're seeing is Americans, citizens of the country, some elected officials, lots of NGOs, saying to the world, we're still in. That we're willing to be able to be here to tell you that we're still going to meet our commitments. Even though one part of our federal government, the executive branch of our federal government, has said that they aren't going to follow the Paris Agreement, it doesn't mean that individual cities, states, organizations, corporations, and others won't do our part to meet it. And in doing so, we'll be doing what we can, and basically what is the most important part of it, implementation, to make sure that the United States does follow the Paris Agreement.
And your thoughts on President Trump being a proud climate change denier?
God bless democracy. I can't say anything for, for the president or his opinions, but I know that I can do my part, and every American can do their part to assure that there's a safe and secure future for our country, economic opportunity and growth through a green economy, and the opportunity to do what our responsibility is to assure that climate change has a minimum negative impact.
President Trump was just in China. It looks like China will be the leader when it comes to building solar panels, alternative energy. They see the market is wide open with the U.S. pushing coal, nuclear, and gas. Your thoughts about this?
Well, we're in Germany, and Germany is a major producer of wind turbines made by German steel by German workers. We see in China the solar cell technology advancing to the point past the United States where the solar cells themselves are becoming able to secure more energy. We look at India where they're being assembled into solar panels, and I ask, why not West Virginia? Why not Michigan? Why not Ohio and Pennsylvania? Why can't we be the ones that are manufacturing and creating these jobs of tomorrow instead of being sold a false promises of the jobs of yesterday?
That's Pittsburgh Mayor Bill Peduto at the UN Climate Summit in Bonn, Germany last week. When we come back, we'll hear from Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe. Stay with us.